Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, 31 years since the UPDF's birth. Can we now boast of a professional army? Today, it is exactly 31 years since the current Ugandan army, the UPDF, was born, signified by the launching of the 1986 Bush War with an attack on the Kabamba military barracks by the then NRA, or National Resistance Army, from which the current National Army has been built. The UPDF came into being after the 1995 Constitution was promulgated, creating through an act the new identity of UPDF. The dark political history of Uganda has not only been characterized by bad leadership, but also unprofessional armies that have taken part in the killing of Ugandans and the destruction of the political, social, and economic setup of the country. Faced with this reality, the NRM government launched a campaign to transform the NRA into a people-centered force with good relations with the people. Several years down the road, the UPDF has ensured that Ugandans are protected and that in general the territorial integrity of the country is intact. Although the achievements of the UPDF are revered locally as well as internationally, some people, especially within the opposition, including those who served in the force previously, believe that the challenge now is to make the army politically immune and national in nature. They believe that the army is being used by the NRM to stay in power and that this could be dangerous. These accusations have been a cause of an exchange recently, but both the army leadership and government have rejected such accusations. Throughout the world, the role of the army is basically shaping the direction of that country. But in Africa, the army is commonly associated with bloodshed, coup d'etats, and protection of leaders, specifically dictators. Now, as we commemorate the 31 years since the birth of the UPDF, we ask, what is the role of the army in the democratization process? Now, looking at the UPDF and the professionalization efforts, can Uganda finally boast of a people-centered army? Our guests tonight, retired Major General Gregory Mugisha Muntu, former National Army Commander, now Secretary for Mobilization at the FDC Party, and Ugandan representative at the East African Legislative Assembly. You're most welcome, Major General Mugisha Muntu.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Honorable Simon Mulongo, former Director of the East African Standby Brigade, now MP for Bubulo County East, and Vice Chairman of the Defense and Internal Affairs Committee of Parliament. You're most welcome, Honorable Mulongo.
Good evening, our dear listeners.
Major General Mugisha Muntu, do we now have a professional army 31 years on since this army was created technically?
It's not yet fully professional. It's not yet fully professional in several aspects. Well, professionalization, a professional army, you need to look at it from two aspects. One is the aspect of being a voluntary service rather than being an army that is based on conscription, where you have people who are voluntarily, who offer their services voluntarily, they are recruited and trained professionally. There's that aspect of professionalism. But there's also the other aspect of professionalism, having an army which understands its role to be for protecting the national borders and also engaging in other obligations if a country has gone into international regional obligations, like in peacekeeping or humanitarian crisis operations. Now, in the case of UPDF, there is the aspect of the total delinkage because of our history. Because NRM during the struggle, NRM was a political wing, NRA was a military wing. When we took power in '86, we knew that we needed to start a process of delinkage. That's what is not yet fully operationalized. Right now, that's where the main challenge is. And I think it is a challenge that we all need to grapple with. The political actors across the political divide, us in the opposition, those in the ruling party, and also the military command. is a challenge which is tricky, is complex. It needs us to apply our minds to it. Nevertheless, however tricky it is, because it's at the core of the stability of our country, is at the core of how a transition would need to be managed, an inevitable transition in my own mind. We will reach that point of transition. I cannot put my finger onto it. I can't say this date or that date. I can't even put my finger on the manner in which it would come. However, I would really like all of us, the different actors, political as well as military in this country, those of us who would want to look into a future which we would want to build, a future that we would all want to be sure that it's going to be better than what we've ever had in the last 50 years. And when you look at the crises we've had all the time in the past, many of them always rotate first on political mismanagement and eventually on the failure to manage a transition. Sometimes it's a failure to manage elections.
Yes.
And the army normally gets wrapped up in that. We have got the benefit of history to learn from, all of us. So none of us should put their heads in the sand. There are so many examples we need to learn from. 2, the current events that are going on in the world. We know it's not only Uganda. There are many African countries, the majority of them fall under the category of emerging democracy.
Yes.
Even in Eastern Europe, even in the Arab countries, most of them are emerging democracies.
Yes.
So the ability for a country to transition, to have stable institutions, to have processes in place on the basis of which a country can be well governed, are dependent on the capability of the political actors as well as the military actors to understand that there is a situation that they are confronted with, a situation that they themselves alone can manage, nobody can manage it from outside of them, and therefore to ensure that we apply our minds to it, however complex it might be, and deal with it.
Right.
And we've seen examples. You can see, for example, like Ghana.
Yes.
Ghana, maybe one can have debate, but there are critical examples on how they have managed to go through their transition. To a large extent, one can say successfully. We have to keep watching it. It has got to be done on a sustained basis. If they have other changes like 3-4 times in future, then one can say they have crossed the Rubicon.
Right.
Here, the biggest challenge is that there could be what one would say, like many say, that there is stability, that there is peace. It's a contentious issue, there's no doubt about that. In my own expectation, actually, peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice.
Yes.
However, that's now besides the point. What we need to understand is that we've not had any transition yet. We've had a long period of 26 years with one more or less government, one leader, basically, one leader.
Yes.
But we're going to reach that point where there is going to be a change. There will be a new leader.
Right.
And all of us need to focus on that.
All right.
Including the military establishment. They cannot escape that.
All right.
And the judgment of the professionalism of UPDF, much as it has advanced, the biggest test is going to be on that.
Managing the transition.
Their success or failure is going to be measured on that.
All right. All right, General Muntu, you've raised quite a number of issues, and I'd like us to go deeper into them at some stage later. But first of all, Honorable Mulongo, would you agree with that assessment? We are yet to get a professional army, 31 years since this army was formed.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, it's very difficult to talk of a professional army. By what standards are we talking of? I think, and I agree to some extent with the General Muntu, that we're not yet there. But I think we made huge strides towards professionalization. We're not yet there because reforms and professionalization are cyclical. There's not just one milestone that when you hit it, you're there. Because even the armies, which are extremely old, say in Europe, that have gone through a number of phases since the medieval times to modern democracies, they're still transitioning. There's still reforms being undertaken, for example, in the UK. we see reforms even after 5 to 10 years. There are reforms with the armed forces. This is because the strategic landscape keeps changing, geopolitics keep shifting, and so you must reform to be able to fit into the new horizon, the new landscape, the new dynamics of politics. Other countries, of course, which are emerging, as you said correctly, are transitioning democracies, and therefore they're having new institutions being built, frameworks being evolved like constitutions, which bring on board new demands and new definitions of roles and functions of, say, the armed forces. And as such, the forces have to be reformed to conform to those new changes, and Uganda is one of them. And I should say that in terms of transitioning the armed forces in Uganda, we've come a whole big way. Start from the ragtag force of 1986. This was just a force that was not properly constituted, not organized, not properly structured, and they're still at formations, so to say. There are no proper units established, and so on and so forth. Look at the time of the reduction in strength of the forces in 1992. This was the beginning. That first of all, in 1986, there were reforms to ensure that every fighting group is brought on board. And the force rose from, say, about
15,000.
It's about 15,000 to over 20-something thousand. It rose to over 50,000. Actually, later on, with the new recruitment, it came to close to 100,000. So, when the demands from World Bank and IMF and so on came in, with some politics around, they had to reduce the swing by about 50,000. And that was a huge thing. What is that? This is part of the reform process. And thereafter, there was a deliberate effort to have a more professional approach to the reforms within the armed forces. And based on that, there was a study was undertaken, supported by the UK. A white paper was developed that generated a security sector reform framework from which the defense policy was generated. So now we're talking of having a white paper that guides the defense review, the defense reforms. We have a policy in place. Of course, it's quite now getting out of date, and which can be reformed. But at least there's some basic documentation that actually spell out a number of things. One, that the structure of the armed force in Uganda are properly spelled out. Not to the extent that one would have wished, but at least this is a baseline. Secondly, capabilities have been defined. What type of arms, systems that we're supposed to have that can actually give security or guarantee security of the sovereignty of this country. And then three, the issue of recruitment, human resource development within the armed forces, training. Institutions of training have been developed. We have now schools of all categories, specialized and general, basic, operational, and national strategic schools in this country, in terms of command and control, in terms of arms management, and so on and so forth. So I see Uganda, and the test of which to it is its capacity to operate within and outside the borders of this country. And I think they've carried out very successful operations outside the country amidst a number of challenges. So I think that to say that we haven't really moved any huge mile, that's not true. But we are not yet there because there are a number of things that are supposed to be in place and which we can touch as we get along. In terms of anchoring properly the issues of doctrine, because we need to develop a doctrine that really shares the thinking, the national interests of this country, the doctrine that can also be able to accommodate the regional integration that we're trying to harness and put in place, a doctrine that can respond to the issues that raised about the dynamics in politics, that when we come to transition, change of power from one regime to the other, especially when there's a party change, that the army remains a stable cornerstone to guarantee the security and constitutionalism of the people of Uganda. These are things we're yet to test. But at least so far, I think we put in place a number of milestones, frameworks that can enable the armed forces be tested largely, whether they can manage the transition he's referring to or not. And to me, largely, they can.
Honorable Mulongo, let's talk about 1995. The army, the National Army, moved from being the NRA, which was basically the military wing of a of a political entity of the NRM. Do you think it changed more than just the name? Is the UPDF really the UPDF, or is it the NRA under a different name? Political wing of the NRM, military wing of the NRM.
I think at that time, General Muntu and I were in the Constituent Assembly. And I remember him passionately arguing about, because he was out of the country and we remained in the CA, and the argument was that we're used to Uganda Army, Kenyan Army, why should we call it something else? And we passed tentatively the name for Uganda Army. And when he came back, he took us back. And he advanced very serious arguments about anchoring the name of People's Army, the Uganda People's Defense Forces, because the NRA was built differently from other armed forces.
Yes.
And we wanted to be to have the people at the center of its ideology. And that's how it is. So the name UPDF actually anchored the thinking, the ideology behind the basis of the armed forces of Uganda, that it was different from other armed forces, and that it could be different from other armed forces, that it's supposed to respect human security other than just state security. And I think that went far away, that it can base itself on the popular interests of the people other than just the state. And that was the purpose of changing from the word NRA to UPDF, among other reasons. So did it actually change anything? Yes and no. What is in the name? There could be, there could not be. But I think other than just the name, it contributed to the path of the transformation of the National Armed Force of Uganda. That it started as a ragtag, reorganized itself, reduced in strength, changed the name and anchoring its ideology, and paved the way for further professionalization. So to me, it is a path that has incrementally been carried out through and through.
Of course, partly the Uganda Army name was rejected because it had it was the same name that Idi Amin used, and the UPDF was closer to Tanzania, where we've had a history, a very close history, historical link to. They have the TPDF. Partly that was the reason. Of course, there were other reasons, reasons behind it as well. Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight. 31 years since the UPDF's birth. Can we now boast of a professional army? You'll be able to contribute to this discussion at some stage. General Muntu, 1995, have we changed more than just the name, or is the UPDF simply the NRA and a different?
There are significant advances, without doubt. When it comes to the army, I also know the ideological orientation of the majority of the officers. A big chunk of them are educated, well educated. A big chunk of them are well trained. I don't doubt their capability. First, I don't doubt the capability of the UPDF in terms of fighting and defending the national borders. I don't doubt their capability in terms of even carrying out other missions. Like, I think they have done quite well when it comes like peacekeeping operations. I know when they were in Liberia, they were quite good. In Somalia, they are doing quite well. I don't doubt their capability to fully profession in the army in terms of training, in terms of modernization of equipment. I know that they have got the capability to deal with all other aspects of professionalizing the army. And that's why most times I don't even talk about those issues. And that's why I keep raising, and I'm going to keep raising the issue of managing a transition. One, working towards a total delinkage. That has not fully happened. Yes. Anybody who's observant in our national politics, I don't want to go into details, you can clearly see. One, the nature of an army. There is a commander-in-chief who is quite a domineering character in terms of style, and who is also quite crafty in the manner in which he manages issues. It's not only the public issues, also army issues. I don't want to go into details. I have been there. I don't want to go into details. And when I'm talking to the senior command, when I'm talking, I don't want to go into details of what I know happens. I don't want to go into details. I'm just only trying to raise their minds onto what is inevitable.
What do you mean?
Onto there will be change.
Yes.
I have no doubt about that in my mind. There's a lot of contention in the country right now. There is a state of uncertainty in the political arena. So when we are moving towards that, all of us, first, we need not deal with the issue of the army like we deal with all other political issues. And I really hope that everybody who is sober-minded, anybody who wants us to deal with the future, square it, needs to deal with these issues, if not in public, because in public at times politicians will want to say things which they think will appeal to their constituents or to appeal to whoever would be listening, but in private ensure that certain measures are undertaken, that a number of things need to be done to deal with what is inevitable. Change is a constant.
Yes.
Anybody who is watching the political situation here in this country needs to realize
the change will come someday.
Yeah, absolutely. No, not even. They are all signals to show that we need to start applying our minds to whatever needs to be done. And so, for us who are political actors, there are things we will do.
Yes.
Those who are in the military and the security service,
they should also
need to know that there are a number of things that they need to do
to prepare for change.
Yes.
We'll have to go for a break. We'll be back. Do stay tuned.
Special fares to the US, London, China, and India, with extra baggage allowance on selected flights. To book your flight, contact your local travel agent or call us on 041-7800-900 or book online at qatarairways.com/UG. Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
Terms and conditions apply.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special.
You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. 31 years since UPDF's birth. Can we now boast of a professional army? Our guests tonight, Major General Gregory Mugisha Muntu, former National Army Commander, now Secretary for Mobilization of the FDC Party and Uganda representative at the East African Legislative Assembly, and Honorable Simon Mulongo, former Director of the East African Standby Brigade, now MP for Bubulo County East, and Vice Chairman of the Defense and Internal Affairs Committee of Parliament. You will be able to contribute to this discussion at some stage. Honorable Mulongo, a core ingredient of stability is the balance, the regional balance of an army, especially in a lowly developed country like Uganda. Do we have an ethnically or regionally balanced army? Or do you think that's not an important thing?
But I thought earlier on we had...
well, let's get that out of the way. Okay. Is it well balanced regionally, ethnically? Or does it not matter?
I think at various levels, no. At the topmost, the top echelon is not balanced. The balancing begins at the lowest operational and tactical level. That's where we see the balance, because the recruitment of late has tended to conform to the constitution, where they have to spread out to all the regions of the country. But at the top, it is not.
Why do you think it's not balanced?
Historical, because at the time when the...
Well, that has been in place 31 years.
Yeah,
it is deliberate.
Yeah, it is not deliberate. I mean, the thing is that careers within the military, it takes time. It takes time. You have to train, you have to grow, you have to be promoted. And the likes of the General Muntu, who dominated the scene because of the historical participation at the time, still, because unless you push them into the sea and bring on board others, they still remain there, star generals, and that explains it.
Honorable General Muntu, do you agree that there's nothing they could do about it?
For me, once you resolve the political questions, the regime in power, because I know the slant is because of that linkage. The unfortunate thing is that you have a regime where you have a president who wants the army as a constituency. So for that very fact, if a president and a regime want to survive and you want the army as a constituency, there are a number of things that don't happen the way they are supposed to happen. So they cause such a slant. It would be cause a conscious effort. Now, to resolve that, you need to have the army, and I believe if it was for the officers in the army, those who are in the command, they know, all of them who have been well trained, that ordinarily promotions depend on a certain criteria which is clear, which is set. In fact, in the processes, you have an officer operating at a certain level for a number of years. He or she goes for training, and at some point they are supposed to do promotion exams. So it becomes an automatic process. Someone who's not able to make it, he is shelved out of the army. You reach a certain age, if you've not done past that course, if you do a promotion exam, you don't pass, and you are in a certain age bracket, you also leave. So you keep moving until you reach the level of Kano. Of course, after Kano and above, it's normally the Defense Council that sits and sees promotions based on a number of criteria. Now, we don't have that criteria yet established well in the army. You still have the committees which sit and do what? And make proposals, which go to the commander-in-chief, and he does that. I know that in 1997, the procedures that I was talking about, there was an attempt to have them established in the army. In fact, two departments, training department and personnel, worked out a document which we discussed and passed, and there was an exercise which started in Ginger. It was called promotional for promotion exams. It was called Promex. But down the road, there was an internal challenge, and therefore it slipped through the cracks.
What was the internal challenge?
I'm not going to go into.
No, tell us. You were Army commander for a long time. You might take some blame for this.
Many things I can talk about. I don't want to talk about certain things.
All right.
I want to concentrate on the strategic issues. Okay. Resolve the political questions, and the military questions would be easily be resolved, because I believe that there are professionals in that army. There are many officers in that army, well trained, well in terms of education, in terms of military professionalism, could be able to sort out an issue of that nature easily.
So it's not a crisis.
It's a political problem. It's not a military problem.
Personalities.
Without resolving the political issue, you are not going to resolve that military.
You say some of the leaders right now are not doing what they're supposed to do, even though they know it's the right thing to do. They're not doing it.
Before the political question is resolved, that military aspect won't.
You're talking in parables. Honorable Mulongo, can the Ugandan army, as we see it now, manage a transition? Would they salute another commander?
Yes, they can.
Oh, you think so?
Yes.
Do you agree, Honorable Muntu?
Come again?
Would they salute another commander? As we see it now.
He said they cannot.
That's what I'm trying to, when I keep communicating on these army issues and the command, that's what I would really like them to prepare for. I don't know whether...
Well, right now, something would happen. By the time you get home, would they salute somebody else?
It's something they have to live with. It's something they must prepare for psychologically. I don't want to judge them now whether they would salute one or not. And to me, that's not the issue. The issue is when that happens. Will they? That's the testing moment.
Oh, but you don't know when it could happen.
I'm trying to tell them that they have to prepare for that.
How long will it take?
They will have to do it. I don't want to give you the time frame. So psychologically, they must start thinking about it. If they are able to, that's what everybody wishes for. Should we come to that point and they can't do it because they have not psychologically prepared for it? Now that would be a period that anything.
Well, but you're really talking more like a politician.
That's how crises start.
Talk to us like a professional soldier, not as a politician from the opposition. Yes. Do you think the army right now is prepared to salute another general?
I'm not in their minds. When I was in command, I would have, and I said so.
I think I just want to follow it from there. I think we need to analyze the development of the Uganda People's Defense Forces to really answer that question. It is true that initially there was no clear-cut distinction between the military and the political body. And I remember when the government just came into power, even district administrators were military people.
Yes.
The cadres who politicized the population countryside were the military people. Intelligence offices were full of military people.
Which is not a problem on its own.
No, it is a problem. Modern armed forces should be
Well, of course, the doctors. I know I have a friend
Yes,
I know
yes,
who is a doctor and is in the army.
That is humanitarian service. It's very different from military service.
Go on.
Now, but along the road there has been attempt to delink the military from actively being the political body. For example, the discrimination has changed from the military people to the civilians.
Yes.
The LC system is gone actually civil. Intelligence services, with the renewal that establishes them, they're now gone. We have civilian intelligence services, ESO, ISO, as opposed to the CMI, which is military. Of course, there are still some members of the military who joined those institutions, but still interested themselves in remaining on the strengths of the military, and are. But large and by, these are the people who are actually managing largely civil institutions, and I think they're there for a good purpose, because the threats that face the country are not necessarily purely civilian. There are also some military-related threats that actually face this country.
What
so
are
they
those?
become
Al-Shabaab.
terrorism, explosive that these
Well,
terrorists use
that's
and
the
all that.
police work. It's not the army.
No. Actually, the police, we look at the structure of the police and their capabilities and their training are not necessarily in conformity with the level of the threat. Some of the threats are actually higher,
Right.
more military than police.
Yeah.
So really, to me, the military has moved away largely from the politics. And then look at I agree with him that the commander-in-chief is so militaristic. I see him
The other
saying,
side is domineering.
well,
Or use the close word.
to me, that could be methods.
His personal style.
Yes, that could be methods of work.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing
You
in that
can-
context?
Has both advantages and disadvantages.
Good.
But a good leader must actually be firm and must hold on to firmly constitutional mandate, as long as he does not exceed his constitutional role. To me, that's not. So the biggest challenge. So you want to have a very weak commander-in-chief,
Go on.
one who cannot even call to order a military officer, because we have had stories about Dr. Bote, who are having summoned one time the late Oito Joke, and he gave him one answer. He said, I brought you here
I can take you out.
and put you there, just enjoy and leave me alone, because he was the chairman of the coffee marketing board. I didn't
Right.
want to be shaken. So I don't think I would like that kind of president who has an idea or take charge of the military and call shots. But if he exceeds constitutional mandate, that's wrong. And I would like to see,
And you haven't seen Museveni doing that, President Museveni.
unless it is pointed out, let it be pointed out. Where?
Talk to us about the army in parliament. Is it a good thing to have it there?
There are some good reasons for it, but it is time now that it should be transiting out. Because
How long should I be out in parliament? 5 years?
I think it shouldn't go beyond 10 years.
Another 10 years?
Yeah, it shouldn't.
We still need the army in parliament for 10 years.
Yes, because we're consolidating the military psyche, the ideology within the military to understand and appreciate the politics.
Well, if they've already done it,
It should be
26 years.
left to the politicians, and the military should concentrate on the military.
Major General.
So there is a history I think we need to appreciate, and you don't just bang, stop it at that. It has to be tailed off, and the tailing off should be given time.
10 years. General Muntu, what?
The military should not be in parliament at all.
Anymore.
In fact, I appeared before the Committee of Defense and Internal Affairs in 2004. The
Yes.
moment it was decided that this country should go multi-parties,
Yes.
in my mind I had always known, and from the discussions that we had had all over, and it wasn't going to be the first country for that to happen. Tanzania used to have the army in parliament. The moment they went, and when there was only CCM as the party,
Yes.
the moment they went multi-parties, there was no debate. The army right away
They had to be in
to
parliament.
And to me, I knew it was going to be automatic. I could see that there were no signals for that happening. I requested here.
Yes.
I requested, and I went before the Committee of Defense and Internal Affairs. I made the argument that the army needs to be immunized. The army should be seen to be neutral it should get out of the parliament, because we had more or less gone into a new political dispensation. Of course, nobody wanted to hear that, and we left it at that. But I still firmly believe the army should not be in parliament.
Well,
that's why I'm talking about solving the political issues first. Because the moment you resolve the political question, the army will be back in barracks.
What kind of crisis would that create if they walked out tomorrow, parliament?
The military? Walking out?
Well, if they are excluded from parliament, what crisis would it create? Forget about your 10 years.
I think, first of all, we should desist from copycatting stereotypes, concepts, and imposing them on African countries. We should allow internally generated ideas and concepts that can be given time to mature, to grow and mature. The fact that Uganda multi-party doesn't mean that the military becomes totally useless when the previous day it was useful.
Not useless. They don't vote in parliament, do they?
They contribute. They actually contribute to the motions. They also pick issues from parliament and feedback to the military.
And do they from the gallery?
Oh, strangers have limitations. They won't.
They can listen.
Just listening and going back.
What's the problem?
No, they should be able to contribute towards the cause of the debate in the House. But the point I'm making is that, yes, I agree the military should be out of parliament.
Well,
but we must allow a transitional period.
Of 10 years.
When, to me, I estimate period, 10 years scientifically, not just because I just want them by style to be out.
All right.
Because when they, for example, parliament has transitioned from no party to multi-party.
Yes.
But what's the big deal?
Give them
about
time.
It? Yeah, we have independents still coming up, a huge number of them. We have parties behaving as if they're still under one umbrella, politics.
Right.
So I think transitioning, and all of us are growing.
I think it's safer that way.
Yes.
Let's hear from your listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight, 31 years since the UPDF's birth. Can we now boast of a professional army? Our numbers 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. Spectrum, hello? Hello?
Hello, Edmond. Good evening.
Good evening, your name?
My name is Joseph and I'm calling from Kampala.
Joseph, yes?
And I want to welcome your two guests in the studio. And I remind General Mugisha Muntu that during the constitution making, I remember vividly very well when he said clearly when the members of opposition were really opposing the military being involved in parliament, and he made a statement which I'll never forget, that in the past, the politicians used to sit in the parliament and make mistakes, and the army, the military, were the ones who suffer the consequences. And he even quoted that there's no single part of Uganda where the youth, as army men and women, where they have not shed their blood, just because mistakes are done by politicians in the parliament, and they are not involved. So he was really a very much advocate of military being, involved in the politics inside the parliament. Now, when he says the military should get out of parliament, I'm really surprised. And that's my contribution. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll get the clarification.
Hello.
Gentlemen.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, your name?
Yeah, this is Wamboga Mugiria.
Yes.
I greet your guests in the studio. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Now, Edmond, I want to look at a more or less a socio-economic perspective in which the army can be involved in building the country. As we get more peace and less engagement, in rebellions and what have you, I would suggest that the army should be deployed in areas like housing, like construction of roads. We've had there's a project to rehabilitate the rail line, but I suggest the army should be deployed in more productive sectors of the economy, like they do in other countries, like in Egypt, like in Cuba and Algeria and other countries where even some of our officers have been trained. The army can make a very big contribution to the building of this country. The fact that the army is disciplined and it has a track record of command and control, it can contribute to some of the dilapidated sectors of our country. Just one day when they cleaned the Mulongo, I saw Mulongo shining. If we can deploy our army in other hospitals of the country, the Liberator and a plan not only merely celebrating Tarehe Sita, but they can also devote experience and skills, and they can see the army more prominently within the public and mingling, and indeed to be truly a people's army.
All right. Spectrum, hello?
Yes, please. To win a match.
Yes.
You see, I think when we are talking about professionalization of the army, we can trace one of the major fault lines is that the army today is clearly growing into a process of being interlocked with the ruling party. And that's why there is a general perception among the public, which is common today on Kampala streets, that today the army rankings, people who are being awarded army ranks today, someone is twisting these ranks, awarding these ranks to the people who are very loyal, people who are very loyal to the ruling party. And that is where the major fault is. Then lastly, we have to question our former army commander. Can you give us some hints on who is the EPT? It is now molded into the special force because it is a mystery to many of our people who don't know where they extend and where they stop. Is it a one-man show? To me, it's a good word.
Very good questions there. Spectrum, hello.
Hello.
Yes, your name?
Good evening, William is my name.
Yes, William.
I think Honorable Mulongo is circumventing and sugarcoating issues. The issue of professionalizing the army has...
We've lost you, William. Please call back. We'd like to hear your question or comment. Spectrum, hello.
Hello.
Yes, your name?
Yes, this is Mugisha Chachambers.
Yes.
First of all, my comment goes back to 86. Between 86 and 90, that is when the army was entrenched within the politics of this country. Because you remember, Mr. Museveni went to the television and he announced that whoever comes out to talk all about the army, please, I am with the army. Should you talk with the army, I will deal with you. So that is when Mr. Museveni showed us that he is part of the army and the army is part of the NRA. And lastly, Mr. Mugisha, can you at least elaborate much about when politicians are being taken to Changwans? That uniform they put on, don't you think that it is part of what shows that the army must be part of the movement and the movement must start the army?
All right. Final caller. Spectrum, hello. Okay. One final caller. Your name?
Hello?
Yes, your name?
Yeah, my name is Farida Chinavi.
Yes, Farida.
Good evening today. I would like to appreciate the army for what it has done for us in the hospital and the entire week actually. I happened to have been chased by one of the army men when I was driving, and I told him, man, what do you want from me? He said, you splashed water on me, and eventually he apologized, and we were on talking terms. This wouldn't have happened before if it was the other regimes that I heard about, but I didn't see. So I really would like to appreciate. And then about the professionalization issue, I think more is to do with the professional ethics, and this has really been done. We only need to fill in some gaps that are really missing, especially where young cadres are involved, to actively participate in the recruitment process. As was the case in Kololo, people had to line up, they had to ask for so many things and everything. I think it should, being a voluntary exercise, they should make it as most as possible. And the issue of regional balancing should also come in. It should also set in, because right now it's reflected as a Western issue. So we need to have a balance of regions while recruiting in the army. I thank you.
Thank you, Farida. General Muntu.
I didn't pick the name of the first caller who was talking about 1995. Yes, that was my belief. And my belief, though, was coupled again with the belief that we needed to transition, that we needed to keep on evolving, that we needed to work on the issue of creating a delinkage. Because when you look at the politics of our country, the army always comes in amidst crises. Most of those crises are always political. So I was very, very sure that as we prepared for the next political dispensation, which to me I knew would be opening up space for political parties, that there needed to be conscious preparation. And to me, we kept on debating this internally, that we needed to prepare so that by the time there is opening up, that there are stable institutions, that even psychologically we all know that we are going into a new political dispensation, unfortunately which never happened. But I stand by what I said then. Now, in 2004, we erupted into that dispensation. All of a sudden, it was never prepared for.
Yes.
A document had been written by a committee which was about opening space. It was never even debated in Chankwanzi. And suddenly, the president said, now we open up for parties.
Yes.
Just like that. And you can see even now, when that happened, therefore we needed to ensure that a number of things that should have been done started being done.
Yes.
And to me, in my mind, I knew that the moment you open up space and there are parties, then there is no way an army can be involved in a partisan...
so they really have no business in parliament?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it puts them in a very, very complicated situation. Now, when there are contentious issues, for example, opposition,
they have to take sides,
and then the movement. They're in quite a difficult situation.
Yes.
So I have no. I don't think there's even a contradiction between what I said in 1995
and now, because there's no multi-party politics.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about, because our time is squeezed. These men will go to Chankwanzi and women, and then they don military uniform.
The issue of training, though, to me, I would rather separate from that, because to me, if the ruling party had really wanted that exercise to continue, one, they could have discussed with the political parties and said, if there are people who would like to go through political military training,
they should go to
as normally voluntary, it could be organized.
Whether so that
anybody could go, and they are trained, and there is political education, and it becomes kind of kind of a national program. If there was disagreement, it could have been closed down. But if something is being done in a neutral way, and you get, for example, facilitators from all shades of opinion, it can be something that adds value in the national politics and consciousness of the country. Okay. The only problem I see with it is that it has been made partisan.
All right. Honorable Mulongo.
Yes.
The army should go professional. They should go productive, do railways and other things.
Yeah, first of all, I thank Ndugwambogo Mugiria for this. But you see, the functions of the military, it depends on the security situation of a given country. They can do productive work, they can be involved in development if they're not involved in certain active operations that would engage their minds elsewhere. And that happens in Egypt, apart from the threat of terrorism. They're not involved in an active war, front or whatever it is, or internally.
Yes.
So that can work if only we manage to neutralize the threats that the army is currently involved in. It's in Somalia, it's in Central Africa, in Sudan, and all this in Congo. So they have less time to devote to development work.
And they even have jets, so it makes their work easier. We got some jets recently, maybe you didn't hear about that.
Well, whatever it is, those are just capabilities. Then Ndugu Tumwine raised the issue of the ruling party promotion and all that. Well, we need to get real data to see this. Are these people being promoted because they're loyal to who? Is it to their commanders? Is it to the party? I mean, I think it's difficult to discern that until you really show me that they were putting on yellow and those who are sitting in blue are not promoted.
Okay.
But of course, it can be something to investigate if there is somebody being promoted because of the party. Then William, we lost him, but circumventing, I'm not sure I'm circumventing. I was speaking professionally and also as a legislator from the ruling party, and I may have my own thinking. Judge Ambrose says entrenchment from 1986, where the president is one and the same as VM.
Yes.
I think that it is a historical issue.
Yes.
He has a military background, but tomorrow you can have a civilian president.
Yes.
I don't think you can turn things the way President Museveni is doing now, because he's a professional. He's a soldier.
Yes.
He's a soldier. He's a freedom fighter.
Is he a professional soldier?
Not a professional soldier.
He didn't go to school to learn to be a soldier.
No, but he's trained.
He's trained.
He's trained.
All right. Major General Mugisha Muntu, the SFG, the Special Forces Group, what are the boundaries? Very, very briefly, in half a minute.
By the time I left command, we didn't have special forces.
Why do we have them now? Is it a good
created, I don't know how many years now, about 2 or 3 years. So I really don't know where they fit within the establishment.
Professionally elsewhere. Do you have room?
Countries,
an elite force protecting oil.
Sometimes, according to the challenges that they face, they can create special forces. And in countries where normally they are designed to respond to specific military threats, I don't think anybody ever cares.
Like the SEALs in America.
The problem that there is here is that they get involved in the operations of another military nature. You find them
we have to go.
situations,
that's
where there is contention.
We have to go. Thank you very much. Our time is up. Major General Mugisha Muntu, retired Major General, former National Army Commander, now Secretary for Mobilization of the FDC Party, and Uganda representative of the East African Legislative Assembly. Thank you for coming to Spectrum, sir. Honorable Simon Mulongo, very eloquent, former Director of the East African Standby Brigade, now MP for Bubulo County East and Vice Chairman of the Defense and Internal Affairs Committee. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.
Fellow Ugandans, the United Nations has declared that access to the internet is a universal human right, along with access to water and food. Like the UN, we believe that every